I've always loved the sound of rain. As a remote copywriter living alone in Asheville, North Carolina, the rainy nights usually help me focus. My apartment is tucked behind an older craftsman-style house, shaded by oaks and shielded by a wooden fence. It's a little detached studio, cozy, quiet, and just remote enough that you don't hear the traffic. On nights like this, when the thunder rolls across the mountains and the air smells like damp bark, I feel like I'm in a cabin deep in the woods. That April night, I made some tea around 7, dimmed the lights, and opened a few windows to let in the storm. I had a project due the next morning, so I sat at my desk with my laptop, the rain tapping the glass, wind brushing the trees, a few rumbles of thunder, nothing dramatic. The lights blinked a bit, but the power held steady. It was peaceful. I was even humming to myself at one point, just enjoying the calm and the rhythm of typing, until it stopped being calm. Around 8:30, there was a flash of light outside, bright enough to cast shadows on the wall, followed by a crack like something splitting apart right above the house. The lights dimmed, flickered, then cut completely. My laptop screen stayed lit for another second before blinking out. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. It wasn't the first time. Storms in the mountains could get intense, and losing power wasn't unusual. I grabbed the lighter from my drawer and lit a couple of candles. The flickering light gave the apartment a golden, uneven glow. I waited. And then I heard a knock, but not from the front door. It came from the back, from the kitchen door, the one that opened to the fenced alley. Nobody ever used that door. I hadn't even opened it in weeks. And the gate beyond it? Always latched. The knock came again. 3 solid, spaced-out raps. Not frantic, not timid, just eerie. I stood still, candle in hand, staring toward the kitchen. My first thought was that maybe a neighbor got confused, but no one should have been back there, especially not during a storm like this. My landlord always used the front path. I didn't realize it at first, but I was barely breathing. I moved toward the kitchen slowly, the candle casting dancing shadows on the walls. When I reached the door, I saw him. A man, standing just beyond the glass. He was completely soaked. His jacket clung to him, his jeans dark with water, his boots puddling onto the mat. No umbrella, just standing there under the pouring rain like he didn't feel it. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe 40s. Ball cap pulled low, a calm expression. You know, when someone looks too calm. I didn't open the door. My instincts screamed not to. He looked up, spotted me, and gave a faint smile, then lifted one hand and gestured, as if to say, "Come here." I didn't move. I stayed right where I was, behind the table. He spoke through the glass. "Sorry to bother you. My car broke down just up the alley. I just need to use your phone real quick." Even through the thick glass, I could hear the smoothness in his voice. Too friendly, too chill, like asking to borrow sugar. It didn't fit the situation. I shook my head. "Sorry, I can't help you." He gave me this puzzled little tilt of the head like he didn't understand. Then the smile returned, and he said my name. "Mara, please, it'll only take a second." He didn't ask. He just said it, plain and soft, like we already knew each other. My heart started pounding. I hadn't introduced myself. I hadn't said a word except to tell him no. I didn't have a nameplate anywhere. How did he know? He tapped one knuckle gently against the glass again. "Come on, don't be rude. You've got your phone right there." I backed away, keeping the candle in front of me like it offered protection. I didn't say another word, just turned, walked to the bathroom, and locked myself inside. I sat on the edge of the tub, trying to steady my hands enough to unlock my phone. Still no power, no signal either. The storm must have knocked out the nearest tower, or maybe the mountains were blocking the reception. I tried to dial 911 anyway. Nothing. I sat there in the dark, me and the candle, alone in that silence, feeling completely cut off from the world. A few minutes crawled by. Then something moved. A dull, low thud from the living room, like someone stepped too hard on an old board. I strained to hear over the sound of the rain, now hammering the roof. Another sound. Closer. A soft bump, like something brushed the hallway wall. I covered my mouth with my hand and stayed still. I could feel the air tighten around me like the space was getting smaller. I stared at the door, afraid it might swing open. My phone still had no service. The glow of the screen mocked me. Then, finally, the power flickered back. The bathroom light clicked on, blinding me for a second. I blinked and checked my phone. 2 bars. I called the police and kept my voice low. The dispatcher listened, took my address, and said someone was on the way. She asked if I felt safe to stay on the line. I said no. I was scared to make noise. She told me to stay put and keep the door locked. It took 52 minutes for the officer to arrive. When he knocked, this time at the front, I demanded his badge number and name before I so much as unlatched the door. He stepped inside, checked around with a flashlight, then made his way to the back. The man was gone, but there were tracks. Muddy footprints that led away from the back door and vanished into the tree line. No tire marks. No second set of prints. Just his. I told the officer everything. He filed a report and said they'd add extra patrols through the area for a few days. But they didn't seem surprised. He looked at me and said, "We get reports like this more than you'd think. Criminals who wait for storms to cover the sound of them breaking in." That didn't make me feel better. I moved out a month later, found a new place across town, somewhere with streetlights, neighbors, no back door. Whenever it rains, my mind goes right back to that night, especially when it comes down hard, when it drowns out every other sound. And I still go still when I hear a knock. It was August 2021, and I was 3 days into a solo road trip up the Pacific coast. I'd just graduated college and wanted to take one last aimless adventure before the weight of real life settled in. I had no strict itinerary, just a duffel bag, some gear, and a rough idea of hitting every strange roadside attraction between San Diego and Oregon. I was sleeping in cheap motels, crashing at campsites, eating gas station burritos, and pretending I didn't have student loan emails piling up back home. That night, I was somewhere near Eureka, California. The rain started in patches, then turned into a full-on deluge right after sunset. Roads were slick, visibility was garbage, and my windshield wipers sounded like they were protesting every swipe. I hadn't seen another car in miles. A couple back roads had already been flooded out, and I was getting nervous about continuing further north. I remember gripping the wheel tighter every time I passed a stretch of road without guardrails. The cliffs out there don't give second chances. I pulled over at a tiny gas station just outside town to check my GPS, but even with full signal, every route forward looked risky. My tank was sitting below a quarter, and I was exhausted. So when I saw an old fluorescent motel sign flickering up the road, blue and pink lights visible through the storm, I took it as a sign. The place looked straight out of a movie, not the good kind. One-story L-shaped building, maybe 10 rooms total. Paint peeling off the trim, a few windows dark, one with a cardboard patch, a vending machine under the awning, and the vacancy sign lit up just as I pulled in. I figured it was better than trying to drive through flooded roads in the middle of the night. At that point, all I wanted was a hot shower, a dry bed, and to forget the rain even existed. The lobby looked straight out of the 80s. There was a bell on the desk, a TV playing static in the corner, and the musty smell of wet carpet and lemon cleaner. A plastic ficus drooped by the window. A map of Humboldt County hung crooked on the wall. A man came out from the back after I rang the bell. Late 50s, long gray ponytail, blue windbreaker that looked 2 sizes too big. He gave me a smile that was more tired than friendly. His name tag just said Cliff. "Rough night to be on the road," he said. "Yeah, I was hoping to make it farther, but I figured it's safer to stop. Got any rooms?" He nodded slowly. "Just one guest earlier, but they left before the storm hit. You're the only one now." I paid in cash. He gave me a brass key with a giant green tag. Room 6. "End of the building," he said. "Wi-Fi's spotty, but there's a heater and clean towels. Holler if you need anything." I thanked him and jogged back to my car, shoes instantly soaked. The rain was heavier now. Wind pushed against me, and I had to shield my eyes with my arm just to see the row of rooms. The light above room 6 buzzed and flickered like a dying bug zapper. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. There was someone already inside, just sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't get a clear look, just a shape in the dark, hunched slightly forward, hands on knees. The room smelled damp, like mildew and something else. There was a strange tension in the air, like I'd walked into a room where something bad had just happened. I instinctively stepped back. My entire body locked up. I said, "Sorry, I think there's been a mix-up." The figure didn't move, not even a flinch. I backed away and shut the door, my hand shaking as I locked it from the outside. Then I walked quickly, almost jogged, back to the office, heart pounding and eyes darting to the dark windows as I went. The clerk was still there, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup, flipping through a phone that looked older than mine by at least a decade. "There's someone in my room," I said, trying to keep it together. "They're just sitting on the bed. You said I was the only guest." He frowned, set the cup down. "Room 6? "Yeah." He walked out from behind the counter and grabbed a flashlight. "Come on." We went back together. Rain pounded on the roof. I stayed a step behind him as he unlocked the door again and swung it open wide. The room was empty. Not just empty, perfectly clean. Bedspread smooth, light on. Air smelled like cleaner and stale air. No wet footprints, no creased bed sheets, no sign anyone had been there at all. I stood there in silence, trying to figure out if I'd lost my mind. Did I imagine it? Did I walk into the wrong room first? The clerk looked at me. "You okay, son?" "Yeah. I swear there was someone in here. Sitting on the bed. I saw them. You've been driving in this rain a while, right? Maybe the light played tricks. People get turned around sometimes." I didn't argue. I felt stupid. He left me with the flashlight and said I could switch rooms if I wanted, but the others hadn't been cleaned yet. I told him I'd be fine and shut the door behind him. The heater clicked on with a groan. I sat down not on the bed, but at the small table near the window, facing the door. I left the TV on volume low, just noise to fill the room. I scanned every corner of that space before I let myself blink for more than a second. The curtains swayed slightly from the draft, and I swear at one point I saw a faint reflection in the TV that didn't belong to me. I didn't sleep much. Around 2 a.m., I thought I heard footsteps on the walkway. Just a few steps, then nothing. I checked the window but didn't see anyone. Figured it might be the wind, or maybe Cliff checking on something. But I never heard a door. In the morning, the rain had stopped. The parking lot shimmered with puddles. I dropped off the key and thanked the clerk, who was back behind the desk like he hadn't moved. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Thanks." As I turned to leave, he added, "You sure you didn't dream that? The person in the room. It's just, you're not the first to mention it." I paused. He shrugged. "Sometimes folks think they see someone in there. Always that same room, but never when I check." I didn't respond, just nodded and left. On the drive out of town, I kept checking the rearview mirror. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe someone sitting in the back seat. Maybe that figure again, standing on the roadside. Something that made sense of it all. But I didn't see anything. I still don't know what I walked in on that night, or who else might have been using that room. I teach night classes at the community college in Laramie. I'm usually out by 9:30, home by 10, maybe later if I stay behind to help a student. That night in late September 2021, I stayed longer than usual, grading some papers, reorganizing a lesson plan, catching up on emails I'd ignored all week. By the time I packed up and got to my car, it was almost 11 p.m., and the storm that had been threatening all evening had finally arrived. It wasn't the kind of drizzle you can ignore. This was one of those Wyoming storms that hits hard and fast. Sheets of rain pounding the windshield, thunder rumbling close enough to shake the glass, wind that pushed my little car from side to side even at a crawl. Visibility was horrible. Streetlights cast hazy glows, blurred by the downpour. Every time my wipers cleared the windshield, it was like it filled back up with water immediately. I should have taken the main highway. It was better lit, less prone to washouts. But I figured I'd save time and cut through one of the old back roads, a narrow two-lane that wound through some abandoned farmland and prairie. During the day, it was quiet and kind of pretty. At night, especially during a storm like that, it felt endless. I kept my speed low, both hands on the wheel, hyper-aware of every sound and shadow. No other cars, no houses with lights on, just fence posts, swaying weeds, and dark, muddy stretches of road. I had my GPS on, I didn't really need it, but it was the kind of night where even familiar roads felt unfamiliar. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a shadow. For a second, I thought it was a trick of the rain. Something about the way the headlights refracted, maybe a blown branch in the wind. But as I got closer, I saw it clearly. A man was standing dead center in the road. Not walking. Not waving for help. Just standing. He was wearing a jacket with the hood up, jeans soaked all the way through. His head was tilted slightly forward, like he was looking down, or maybe just watching the ground. His hands hung by his sides. No backpack, no flashlight, no car anywhere nearby. He didn't seem hurt, but he also didn't seem right. I eased my foot onto the brakes. I didn't want to slam them and risk skidding, but I had to stop. The tires hissed as they slowed. I stopped maybe 30-40 feet away from him. My headlights lit him up, but he didn't even blink. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. He didn't move, not a twitch. I considered rolling down the window to call out, but something stopped me. The whole thing felt off, wrong. My instincts screamed not to engage, not to speak. I slid the gear into reverse and started backing up slowly. I was planning to turn around and take the long way back toward the highway. There was no shoulder to speak of, just soft dirt that had turned to mush. One wrong move, and I'd end up stuck in a ditch. Still, I kept my eyes on him. He didn't react. He didn't try to follow. Nothing. When I thought I had enough space to ease past, I shifted back into drive and started inching forward again, this time veering slightly to the right so I could pass him. I had maybe 4 feet of clearance between my car and the ditch. Not ideal, but doable. I thought if I kept it slow, I'd be fine. That's when he moved. Not a step, not a lurch. It was like he was suddenly airborne. 1 second standing, the next slamming down onto the hood of my car with both hands. His face hit the windshield. I could see his eyes. Wide, empty, void. Like there was no one behind them. He started pounding. Hard, one fist, then the other. Over and over. No yelling, no shouting. Just those sick, rhythmic thudding of his fists against the glass. His hood had fallen back slightly, and I could see thinning hair, pale skin, maybe late 30s or 40s. But his expression didn't change, not once. He didn't seem to care that he was getting soaked or that he was putting himself in danger. I slammed the horn. It echoed uselessly. The wipers smacked against his arms and shoulders. I think I screamed something, probably a string of curses, but it didn't matter. I hit the gas. The car jerked forward. He slid off the hood almost instantly and hit the wet pavement with a dull thud. I didn't stop to see what happened next. I just drove. Fast. Fast enough that the tires hydroplaned once or twice. My hands were shaking, but I kept them tight on the wheel. It took me another 10 minutes to reach the gas station at the edge of town. By then, the rain had softened, but I was soaked with sweat, still gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me safe. My phone was dead, so I asked the guy at the counter if I could use theirs to call the police. He handed it over without asking too many questions. Just watched me with this weird kind of concern, like maybe I was about to pass out or start crying. A cruiser pulled up about half an hour later. 2 officers stepped out. I explained what had just happened, and one of them stayed with me while the other went to check the road. About 20 minutes after that, he came back and shook his head. No sign of anyone. No blood. Not even a scuff in the mud where I swore the man hit the ground. They checked my hood and windshield, and sure enough, the hood was dented where the man had jumped. Are you sure it wasn't an animal? Maybe a large deer? I wanted to be mad, but I understood the question. It was a man, I said. I saw his face. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Told me they'd file a report anyway and gave me a card in case I remembered anything else. I drove home the long way that night, took the highway, stayed under the speed limit the whole time. I didn't tell many people about what happened. A few friends, my sister, most thought I must have been exhausted or overworked, but I know what I saw. And I don't take that road anymore, not even in daylight. I've been a ranger with the Kentucky Division of Forestry for almost 9 years now. You spend that much time in the backcountry, you start to understand what belongs and what doesn't. Broken branches, scattered trash, campfire pits, those things have stories. The land tells you when something's off, even before your brain catches up. That's what happened to me last October, after a week of hard rain and high winds rolled through eastern Kentucky. We'd had reports of a minor mudslide out near Trillium Ridge, just north of the state line. Nothing serious, just enough to block part of a horse trail and shift some of the underbrush. It was my turn to check it out. I drove up alone, like usual. The weather had calmed, but the sky still looked angry. Low clouds hanging heavy, like they were ready for round 2. Mist clung to the treetop, and everything smelled like wet leaves and churned up soil. The kind of air that feels thick when you breathe it, like the woods aren't done with you yet. The access road was a mess, full of ruts and pooling water. I parked by the trailhead around 4:45 p.m., just before it started getting dark. I had my light, my radio, and enough sense not to linger. My plan was to mark the slide, take some photos, and be back to the truck before the fog really rolled in. I'd barely started walking when I heard it. A baby crying. It stopped me cold. Not wailing, just this weird, calm cry. Faint, but real. At first I thought maybe I was hearing something echoing through the trees, but it was too distinct, too human. It was coming from off the trail, deep in the woods. I radioed it in, told dispatch I'd be checking on a possible lost hiker or kid, then headed toward the sound. I wasn't about to ignore something like that, even if it didn't make sense. This was not a park with campsites nearby. No one should have been out here, especially with a baby. I moved slowly, sweeping my flashlight back and forth. Rain had softened the ground, made it hard to hear anything besides my boots squelching and the sound of water dripping from the canopy. The crying continued, always just a little further. It wasn't panicked, just persistent, like it was waiting. At one point, I stopped and called out, asked if anyone needed help. Nothing answered me except the sound of rain slapping the leaves. I kept walking, and then it stopped, just like that. No fading, no tapering off, like someone hit mute. I stood there listening, waited. Nothing, no crying, no wind, just the quiet hum of waterlogged silence. That's when I noticed it. A scrap of fabric snagged on a low branch, pale blue. Looked like part of a baby blanket, one of those cheap fleece kinds you'd find at a dollar store. I stepped closer. It disintegrated the moment I touched it, crumbling in my fingers like it had been out there for years. The color was sun-bleached, the edges rotted. No way it had just been dropped. I looked around and realized I'd gone a lot farther off trail than I thought. I marked the coordinates on my GPS and turned around. Getting back took longer. Visibility was worse, and my boots kept sinking in the soft earth. I kept looking over my shoulder, not because I thought someone was there, but because everything felt too quiet. Off, like I'd crossed into somewhere I shouldn't have. When I reached the trailhead, I saw it immediately. My truck had been moved. Only a few feet, but enough that I noticed. I'd parked it facing slightly downhill, nose toward the trail, like I always do. Now it was crooked, angled more toward the woods. At first I thought maybe the mud had shifted under it. Wouldn't be the first time. But then I saw the footprints. Not mine. Larger, heavier. They circled the driver's side, then stopped at the tailgate. There were two sets now. One was fresh, the other older, so faded the tread was barely visible. The mud was too churned to tell which direction they'd come from or gone. But they definitely hadn't been there when I parked. I walked around the vehicle, scanning the tree line with my flashlight. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. Maybe still was. Every part of me wanted to leave, to get back behind the wheel and put as much distance between me and that place as possible. I radioed it in again, told dispatch I was returning to base and would file a full report. I didn't bother sticking around to investigate. Whatever had been out there, I didn't want to meet it in the dark. Back at HQ, I pulled the trail cam footage from earlier that afternoon. There's a camera mounted just above the path entrance, pointed right at where I'd parked. I expected to see myself arriving, getting out, heading into the woods. Instead, there was nothing. The camera feed was just dark. I logged everything in the report, filed it like I was supposed to, left out a few details I couldn't explain. Nobody followed up. I can't forget it. The way the crying cut off the second I stepped closer, the prints in the mud, like something out there was baiting me, and I almost fell for it. If you think running out of gas just means a long walk, you clearly haven't watched this channel enough. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop what you do in these nightmare scenarios. Because sometimes it's not the empty tank that gets you, it's who finds you stranded. Click now to watch 4 horrifying out-of-gas horror stories. You might never skip a fuel stop again. Stay ready, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.